The Shark Deck.
Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Johnny Mac, is it true that you do a lot of Joe Rogan stories because putting Joe Rogan in the episode titles helps the numbers? Yes, it is true. Joe Rogan said about his new club, the whole idea is to make it the best possible place for stand-ups to perform. He was talking about the club with his guest Andrew Schultz. Schultz said, what Joe's trying to say is the whole idea is for him to make no money. It's for comedians to make all the money. Rogan said, look, my only goal is that the club break even. I don't care if it makes money. I make a lot a month. I don't worry about money. Comedian Paul Smith is into the mental health benefits of MMA training ahead of his octagon fight with reality TV star Jake Quickenden. Paul Smith says it's been really good for my head. Smith and Quickenden will square off in Manchester in a fight promoted by Octagon. Smith was motivated to swap telling jokes for taking punches when he realized it could benefit Liverpool-based charity Weapons Down, Gloves Up. Smith told TalkSport, I'm a big fan of MMA and I've kind of dabbled in it a little bit. I'm more of a spectator. I've loved it for years. I get asked to do fights all the time. I don't know why. The charity I'm doing it for is Weapons Down, Gloves Up. The promotion offered me good money and I said no to it. Then a few events happened in Liverpool where some kids were killed senselessly. I was reading about the charity and I thought, if I can do it for a good cause, sure, why not? He said, I'm about 2 months into the journey now and it's done wonders for my mental health, which was just a lovely side effect to it all. It's been really good for my head, especially getting deep into the tour. I'm on the road all the time and I've been able to maintain training and stay disciplined with the diet and stuff. I'd recommend to anyone, if you're struggling with mental health, get into an MMA gym. You think they're going to be these scary places full of dead, aggressive people? But they're full of lovely people. It's really supportive. You get in here and you end up chatting to them like therapists. It's just mad. This is a one-off. I'm never doing it again. I love my job. I don't need to do this. I've got massive respect for people who do this for a living. It's something you've got to be fully in. It's taken that much of my life up. I'll do it once, but I wouldn't make it my whole life because I'm having to sacrifice a lot to do this. I really want to change my Instagram profile to Undefeated Professional MMA Fighter. That reminds me, I recently challenged Joe Rogan to fight in the ring anytime, anywhere, Joe. My challenge stays out there. Are you afraid? Jim Gaffigan talked about his Sunday commentaries on CBS, and Jim said, my son, who's 17, when I do these CBS Sunday commentaries, he's like, you've got to come at it more hard. And I'm like, it's a Sunday morning show. And he goes, yeah, come at it harder. You got to shock people. And I'm like, no, it's not necessary. People are drinking coffee, and I'm talking about an observation about receipts. I don't need to shock them. Jim talked about working clean, said the great irony is that, of course, I curse in everyday life when I'm dealing with my children, but I don't on stage. Anyone who's a parent knows that. When you're at work, you're not sitting there cursing, but if you're trying to deal with a 12-year-old who refuses to wear her winter coat, you get frustrated. My journey to being, or I think understanding that I'm a clean comedian, it was a journey. I tried a lot of different types of comedy. Some of my favorite comedy is filthy or irreverent or shock-based, but it has to be authentic. I'm from a small town in Indiana. Where I'm from, if you stubbed your toe, you could curse. People would understand that. But if you're talking about Burger King, why are you cursing? Nashville Scene asked Sarah Silverman about her time hosting The Daily Show. She said, I had experienced things like that before. I've hosted shows and stuff, but the immediacy of it being daily was an incredible experience. Just how jokes can't be precious. You can't spend too much time. The producer, Jen Flans, is there when you're working on the content for the show. And if we spend too much time on a joke, she's like, keep it, leave it, move on. And it was so cool. I love the feeling of immediacy. You know, it's a completely different approach to the material because you want it to be as good as it can be, but you also have to just move on, keep going. All right, Sarah, who would you like to see guest host? She said, oh my gosh, I don't know. So many people. I think Tig Notaro would be hilarious. Yeah, I could see that working. I'd like to see what Zach Galifianakis does with it. I mean, there's so many people, so many comics that'd be fun. Chelsea Handler did a phenomenal job the week before me. She can do that in her sleep. It's just so fun to watch. The headline for the New York Post, New York City loses one of its greatest 3 a.m. fight venues. Yeah, the McDonald's on the corner of 6th Avenue and West 3rd closed last year, but it's got a new owner, Noam Dworman. He's the owner of the Comedy Cellar. He purchased the building for $7.3 million. Apparently, the Comedy Cellar's doing okay. He told the New York Post he plans to open a third comedy club. He owns the Comedy Cellar and the Village Underground around the corner. He says the new place will have a similar vibe to the Comedy Cellar, although it'll be a little more theatrical because we're going to have a mezzanine there. He said the comedy industry is alive more than ever, and he needed to find a way to solve the overflow problem. He likes the location. It's right across the street from the subway. It's freestanding. There's not an issue with tenants who are inconvenienced by the club or by the lines, things like that. So I bought it with an eye and a half towards my children's future, not just mine. As an aside, that particular McDonald's was, quote, once known as the enter-at-your-own-risk emporium of fast food, with a history of fast-moving fists and not a sober person in sight. The former McDonald's was considered one of the most violent in the city, suggesting that there are even more violent McDonald's in New York City, due in part to its location surrounded by bars and their belligerent patrons. First of all, when you're in the Village, you hit the Gray's Papaya. Is the Gray's Papaya long gone? I haven't hung out in the Village since the 1990s. It's possible that it closed. I think it did close. And like most things on this podcast, it all comes back to Adam Sandler. Why? In the movie Big Daddy, one of the Adam Sandler great films, Adam Sandler yells out his iconic line, "Will somebody get this kid a Happy Meal?" Took place in that McDonald's. How about that, huh? Chris Gethard is doing an off-Broadway show at the Minetta Lane Theater this weekend. It's called A Father and the Son, S-U-N. So Broadway World, his inspiration was, well, like any comedian who was a kid, there's going to be jokes that show up in the joke notebook about it, and I had a few of those along the way. I was doing them on stage and workshopping stuff. I was driving to a show with another great New York comedian, Martin Urbano. He was with me in the car. We were driving to a show together. We were having a conversation, not about jokes, not about our act. I was talking about getting bullied as a kid. And I was telling him, how am I going to wrap my head around that if it shows up in my kid's life? Am I going to flip out? And he started asking me about it, and I told him a story about this thing my dad did one night, and he was like, dude, you have to tell that on stage. And I was like, no way, that story's really dark. And he was like, you got to try it, man. This is pretty incredible. So he tried it out in an outdoor show in Massachusetts at a place called Ralph's Rock Diner. Chris said, if there's any place where I can see if I can get away with it, let me try it here in this parking lot in Massachusetts. The Hollywood Reporter caught up with Bill Lawrence. He's the brains behind Ted Lasso and Scrubs and a bunch of other things you probably like. And they asked him about Ted Lasso spinoffs. His answer, if you hear anybody hedging, it's just because everybody's super comfortable with the fact that Jason gave up a lot to move his family and his life to London. It's really rough. The truth is, he'll come out of the smoke of cutting this show and doing all this stuff, and if he feels like doing more, he'll do more. And if he doesn't, he won't. I'll tell you, I've never met a dude less motivated by dollar signs. I mean, I'm a producer. I'd be doing Ted Lasso cartoons already.
We made USAA insurance for veterans like James. When he found out how much USAA was helping members save, he said,
it's time to switch.
We'll help you find the right coverage at the right price. USAA. What you're made of, we're made for. Restrictions apply.
If you'd like to support the show, there are two things you can do. One, go to Apple Podcasts. They'll put the option under your nose to become a premium subscriber for $5 a month, and you can do the first month for free. You get the episodes ad-free and early. So early usually means the afternoon before official release, but the weekend episodes you tend to find in your box on Friday morning. The other thing you can do is you can go to buymeacoffee.com and buy me a coffee. Now, hopefully I won't do what I did this morning. You hear this? This is a medium. Johnny Mac, you always get a large iced coffee with caramel and milk. What's going on? I clicked the wrong box. I was so sad when I went to the National Donuts chain. They were like, here's your medium. And I was like, what? buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews. The Melbourne Comedy Festival is dark on Monday, so we won't do that segment today. From Yahoo, comedian Al Murray has revealed he gets targeted on social media by companies selling hair loss cures. You see, Al Murray has this comedy persona, the Pub Landlord, and the Pub Landlord is bald. However, Al Murray, not bald. He said, I have a full head of hair. They always say, have you lost weight? I get sent things on Instagram, baldness cures and stuff, but I don't need it. He was asked of his alter ego, do you ever feel like you've created a monster you can't escape? Murray said, I do when I look in the mirror and I've cut my hair off, yeah. The host was incredulous. You actually cut your hair off? You don't wear a bald thing? Apparently not. How did the Pub Landlord come to be? It happened one night at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Murray said, I did a show with Harry Hill and it came on, put all the bits together and it didn't work. So the night we got to the Edinburgh Fringe, we were in a bar and I said, why don't we just say that the MC didn't turn up and the barman has offered to fill in? And he went, whatever. And I went on and did the Pub Landlord and it worked. So the next day I cut my hair off. The Pub Landlord went on to become so popular that he hosted 3 series of Saturday night entertainment shows. Al Murray's Happy Hour on ITV. Murray said fans are always surprised when they see him with hair. And that is your comedy news for today. Follow the show for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your shows. See you tomorrow. Did you know you can name a cockroach after your ex-lover and have it fed to the animals at the zoo? Hi, I'm Johnny Mac with 5 Good News Stories. It's a podcast twice a week where I tell you 5 good news stories, 5 fluffy stories. I just want to make you smile to start your day. I can tell you about a cat and a rabbit that fell in love, or I can tell you how porta potties are about to be a lot less horrible. What kind of show is this? It's called 5 Good News Stories. The number 5 Good News Stories. Follow it, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your shows. 5 Good News Stories.